it anyway because it's just good, isn't it? Just to make sure that everybody can hear. But we're really happy that you're with us tonight. For those of you that are guests and you've joined us, this isn't actually a church event, although it's looking a bit like a church event. But it's great to have you with us tonight, and for what we believe is going to be a really exciting and fruitful discussion around all things sex. Now, we're aware that we're living in 21st century Britain. There's a lot of diverse perspectives and opinions when it comes to sex today, especially with everything going off, LGBTQ and all those things. And I just want to assure you tonight that all opinions, all perspectives, no matter what you believe about this subject, they're all welcome in this space. This is a safe space to have a discussion about all things sex. And so I've got a question for you really, just as we start. And I want to ask you this question. What is your belief system when it comes to sex? What do you think? What do you believe? What are your philosophy, if you like, when it comes to the subject of sex? Just hold that thought. There's going to be a couple of talks. I love the eager ones. Come on, that's like me as well. There's going to be a Q&A at the end of the talk, and there's going to be an opportunity for you to get your say, for us to have a conversation, and for us really just to kind of grow in truth and knowledge together. So really excited about that. Well, the only thing we would ask is that all comments be kept respectful, be kept honouring, be kept mature, so that we can have a mature conversation and a fruitful conversation at that. Anyway, without further ado, let's talk about sex, shall we? Shall we? Let's talk about sex. A bit of a taboo subject, isn't it? But we're here to talk about sex. I want to begin tonight by providing a brief introduction about the cultural landscape we find ourselves in before handing over to Bobby, who has joined us tonight. I want to provide a quick overview, a sort of analysis, if you like, of the current cultural landscape in order to provide some context for us so that we can have a fruitful discussion this evening, okay? And the title of my short talk is this: where are we and how did we get here? Okay, that's a very important question. Many of us have not kind of thought that. We live in this world, we just live in it, and we don't really question how we got here and where it came from. I mean, it wouldn't be fresh news for you tonight if I told you that our culture cannot stop talking about sex, would it? I mean, we all know that, it's obvious, isn't it? Our culture is obsessed about sex. When turning on the TV, when listening to the radio, or even when walking down the street, right, in Oxford. It's not long before you're confronted with some idea of sex in some way, shape or form. We think about Hollywood movies, the music industry, the fashion clothing, which kind of draw attention to bodies and skin, yeah? It all seems to be centred around this promotion of sex, due to sex being at the very core of the human experience. No one needs to be told today that the movie called The 40-Year-Old Virgin is a comedy film, do we? We all know it's a comedy film, which is something we're all clear on because of the value our society places on sex. I mean, just journey with me with this thinking a minute. Isn't it a failure, according to our modern culture, to have not had sex by 40 years? Yeah. It is. People see that. I mean, isn't being sexually inactive to be less than a whole human being? I think people do think that. And though you might not agree with this openly, I'm sure that we can all admit that we do sort of operate and respond based on these assumptions because it's the culture that we live in. I mean, they say we live and think today I do want to say today that a lot of these ways that we think, a lot of this stuff around our present culture when it comes to sex is simply unprecedented. Like the things that are going off in our culture today, they've never happened throughout the whole of history. And I really want to show you why tonight. You see, all these touch points in our culture are simply symptoms of the sexual revolution. A revolution originating in the 60s that sought to normalise sexual phenomena such as pornography, sex outside marriage, and even same-sex relations. It achieved this by seeking to remove all social stigma around these phenomena. And this is evident today in our mainstream cultural use of pornography, in that it's no longer carrying the shame and stigma that it once did in previous generations. Now I must emphasise this before we go any further, that the sexual revolution didn't simply promote expansion of the boundaries of accepted sexual behaviour, but it completely abolished sexual codes and sexual norms. That's its desire, that's why it was crafted and formed so that it could have this end. So, what brought us to this point? What are the causes of these drastic changes in society, especially within the context of sex? What caused the sexual revolution? I want to take just a few minutes just to explain that and journey with you through that. Now, some of you might be saying technology. Technology is the thing that caused the sexual revolution. Well, yeah, amen. Like the internet, surely that, pornography through the internet, contraception, the pill, condoms, the abortion industry. Yes, all this stuff makes the sexual revolution possible. But its foundations, I want to tell you today, go much deeper than that. Namely, in the development of what it means to be human. What it means to be an authentic, fulfilled human self. It's philosophical. You see, these developments in thought and philosophy date back much further than the swinging 60s, but all the way back to the Enlightenment, the French Revolution. You can thank or blame Jean-Jacques Rousseau for much of modern philosophy today, as he paved the way for all who would follow. Rousseau is maybe little read or even unknown in our present culture today. However, his ideas are common assumptions of all of us. We all live by these assumptions now in the Western world. Rousseau makes a vital contribution to our discussion this evening as he introduced a new understanding of the human self, one that focuses on the inward, physical, therapeutic, emotional self. And he said that this is the thing that offers the most profound account of personal human identity. He lays the foundation for expressive individualism by arguing that the individual is the most authentic, and get this, this is really important, I'm sure you've got to relate to this. He argues that the individual is the most authentic when acting in public, his inner feelings and desires. The private becomes public, right? And this concept of the self is the philosophical precondition for modern identity politics, and especially sexual politics at that. Now, Rousseau also believed that the individual wasn't the source of society's problems, but rather the society itself was the issue. And then Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche and Sigmund Freud would all later build upon this very idea. The notion that the external surroundings are to blame for the individual's problems in life is sort of an unrivaled orthodoxy in today's culture. Many of you studying at Brooks University will know about that. These are sort of the way that history is viewed. And it's vitally important tonight that we think about that concept as we look at this subject. Take, for instance, the naturalistic evolutionary contributions of Charles Darwin. He provided credibility to these ideas. For if the world came to its current condition through evolutionary processes, making sin, human sin, a myth, then he figures that something outside of humanity is to blame for the suffering, for the evil, and for the oppression. And if society corrupts, then the history of society becomes a history of the corruption and oppression of the human nature. History becomes a tale of woe, rather than a source of wisdom that we can all learn and gain insight from. Now, these are the origins of critical theory. That's what I'm talking about here. Critical theory is a predominant way of viewing history today within modern educational institutions. And Karl Marx and Friedrich Nietzsche both viewed history in this way. They viewed history with a deep suspicion of traditional authority and institutions. I mean, according to Karl Marx, the family, the Christian idea of the family, man, woman, children, and the church, both these institutions exist to cultivate, reinforce, and perpetuate the middle-class bourgeois values, the oppressor. That's what the church and the family represent. They want to constrain things, and they want to oppress people and maintain that oppression. I mean, this is central to the later forming of the sexual revolution, as I'm going to show, which was focused on overthrowing traditional conservative classes through the liberation of sex. That's what it's all about. We need to destroy the family. We need to destroy all these things, these conservative norms and ideas, through liberating sex. The final and definitive step in this process comes at the hands of Sigmund Freud. Before Freud, sex in the world was an activity for procreation and recreation. Yet after Sigmund Freud, sex is definitive of who we are as individuals, as societies, and as species. Sex therefore becomes a fundamental to human identity. Thanks to Freud, everything in our world today now seems to be connected to sex in some way, shape or form, because human beings are at core sexual beings, according to Freud. This shapes our thinking and our behaviour in profound and yet often unconscious ways. Sex is so fundamental to human existence and experience that it's penetrated all areas of our lives, our societies, and our cultures. I mean, just get on this 1 second. Freud, right, he puts the sex drive at the very core of who and what human beings are, from infancy even. And consequently, contemporary education has become preoccupied with the liberation of children's sexual instincts through sex education. The goal of this endeavour is to liberate people from traditional sexual codes and from religion which maintains them, so that individuals can express their true inner self by expressing themselves sexually. And I want to say to you today that this is why private sexual behaviour now has great public and political significance. Once our identity was understood as sexual, it was only a matter of time before it became political. And thanks to the marriage, no pun intended, of Marx and Freudian thought, society now intuitively associates sexual freedom with political freedom. But I want to ask you this question. Is it wise for us to be building our whole society on the philosophies of these men? I mean, take for example Darwinism. It denies that human nature has any intrinsic or transcendent meaning or purpose. And therefore human nature becomes fluid, sex and gender become social constructs that can be manipulated. Compile this with the thinking of Nietzsche's ethics of taste, where people's tastes, desires and emotional preferences become the sole ground that we work out our ethics, what's right and wrong. Basically, it's whatever you feel, whatever preference you like. I mean, if we run with that, which our culture has done, we end up with a morality of taste. And those who shape popular taste become the most powerful cultural elites in our day, setting society's moral standards. I want to ask you today, are we not all victims of one huge game of identity politics played out by the cultural elites of our time? I think that's a question that we would do well to consider in this generation. Whatever you think, one thing is for sure. We now live in an unprecedented world defined by our sexual desire at all levels, through philosophies like education, science and politics, through to the arts, movies, music, literature, from the sexualized tools of the advertising industry to the increasingly explicit products released by Hollywood. We all know that sex sells. The sexual revolution promised liberation. It promised freedom and authenticity. It promised connection, fulfillment and happiness. The sexual revolution, in short, holds out to us the promise of human flourishing. But I want to ask you this evening, has the revolution kept its promises? And for that question, we now move over to Bobby.